How do you do? I'm Dustaroo, and I want to talk to you about the killers in Dead by Daylight, but specifically about the worst thing about playing as each of them. With over 30 plus different kinds of killers and powers, there's going to be a massive amount of issues that are completely unique to individual killers. Some definitely intersect with each other, like, spoiler, a lot of these killers' biggest issues are with collision and hitboxes. Even in those situations, each find their own personal way to be frustrated by the jankiness. This is also not a situation where the worst thing needs to be changed about them, but it's more so accepting and acknowledging the reality that with these powers they wield, they have unavoidable problems that will make a lot of players annoyed when they do come up. Some could be changed, altered, adjusted, but ultimately this is just part of the DNA of who that killer is and always is going to be. So let's talk about the worst thing about playing as each Dead by Daylight killer. There are quite a few things you can call the worst thing about the Trapper, like survivors trailing behind you, disarming all your traps the moment you leave, or placing a trap down in a loop mid-chase just to have the survivor run away. But I think the worst thing about the Trapper is without a doubt the early game setup. Set up your traps in a few different positions around the map, and by the time you do actually start to chase a survivor, 2, maybe even 3 gens will often be popping in the near future. You spend a good amount of precious early game time collecting traps like loose change scattered all over the trial, and putting them in spots you can hopefully use later in the match, making the time somewhat worth it, if they already haven't been disarmed when that moment comes around. Or you can pick the alternative and just immediately start to chase survivors and be left without much of an ability to shut loops down. Besides, slowly placing that trap and watching that survivor wander off to another loop, until you can maybe find that moment to get a hit or a down. Either way, the start of the match is the hardest and most frustrating time playing as the Trapper, as these precious minutes can often be wasted, making the rest of the trial more stressful to keep up with the survivors, unless you can pull off a successful snowball. The worst thing about the Trapper, early game setup. Wraith is a simple, straightforward killer. Not a lot to really exploit, more so than other killers, besides one thing. Survivors who know how to force you to uncloak. When the survivors really know how to drag out your time and sit at a window, waiting for you to uncloak, and the moment you do, they hop through that window and force you to run it like a basic M1 killer. And if you ever do cloak again, they reposition and start it all over. I don't think it's anything too annoying, but it is probably the only real thing that even frustrates a little bit on the Wraith. Maybe some body blocks while cloaked, but every killer besides a select few really knows that pain. The worst thing about the Wraith, forced uncloaks.
I am Chainsaw.
The worst part about the Hillbilly is something that feels way better now than it did half a year ago. Simply going around a loop in a chainsaw sprint and colliding with it in a way you wouldn't expect. Snagged on an edge of some invisible object or small twig, but this does happen a lot less than it used to, so it's not even a major issue anymore. But the few times it does show up, it does feel bad. The worst thing about the Hillbilly, chainsaw sprint collision issues.
Madame, are you ready to level up?
When it comes to playing the nurse, after you get past that whole learning to use her power without throwing up thing, she doesn't really have too much wrong with her. The staring at the ground after every hit, or miss, or miss, or miss can be annoying, especially if you are missing a lot. But I find the thing that really boils my blood when I'm putting that nursing degree to good use, going for a short blink through some obstacle, usually at a loop, and undershooting it, basically staying in the exact same place and completely looking like an idiot and having to hear that dreaded gasp again. But hey, there is a silver lining. At least half the time survivors run back into you because they didn't expect you to mess up so bad, so you still get the hit. Still feels bad though. The worst thing about the nurse, messing up short blinks.
But here's the thing. I don't want to be the bad guy anymore.
Michael. For a man of such determination, you sure have a tough time navigating the world. Michael is one of those killers where basically everything he does is frustrating, moving as fast as I do in my dreams until he's able to level up to Evil Within 2. Accidentally overshooting your stock and popping tier 3 too early, not being able to stalk a survivor when they are clearly within sight. I could go on, but let's not turn this video into a multi-hour essay. I think out of the sea of issues, one really hurts more than any other. When a survivor is completely drained of evil. There is no more juice in that juice box, and you don't have a power anymore, for the simple fact that you already used it a few times earlier. Imagine using your power so well, you're punished with it not being able to be used again. I have to say, it feels really bad. I guess it's your fault for not tunneling out the most drained survivor and spreading that love out a little bit. It's especially rage-inducing when it's a tough match where both sides are performing really well and making each side really work for everything they're given. But they simply get the advantage because your power runs out. The funniest part about it is if there wasn't already 2 killers already who basically did the exact same thing as Michael, but forever, it wouldn't sting quite so much. The worst thing about Michael Myers, running out of your power.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Besides the fact that you're playing Hag, honestly the worst part about playing her is just how slow you are. Everything you do is so slow. Chases, anti-loop, camping. It seems like the Hag is just set on 0.5 speed all the time, which usually beats the player into submission to adapt to a more boring and often camping related playstyle. You can make specific builds to help lessen this damage, but it's undeniable how bad it feels trying to chase as Hag and even patrol the map. If the survivors don't play like my solo queue teammates and actually look at the ground and remove phantasms, you're just left playing a boring and slow killer, where digging yourself out of that hole will require some major brain power and underhanded tactics. The worst thing about the Hag, how slow she and her playstyle is.
You underestimate my power!
No sugarcoating it with the Doctor. The worst thing about playing the Doctor is using your shock on a survivor to block them from making a vault on a pallet, window, whatever. You hit them, but they still make that vault because they queued up the action a whole second earlier. Doesn't matter if you hit them before they actually started vaulting, they were locked in the input pretty far away, so they get priority and get to hop over. It's not even the fact that they get to vault, it's the fact that a lot of the time you think they won't, so you push them assuming you will be able to get a hit, but now you just put yourself in a bad spot, giving them either a lot of distance or a better position to do it all over again. And all that you get for it, all that was left for your troubles, is the thought in your head, they made that? The worst thing about the Doctor? Shock not cancelling survivor vaults.
How'd you like a nice big axe to play with, eh?
The worst thing about the Huntress? What else but collision issues? Huntress has always suffered from hitbox issues with her hatchet. Sometimes you toss it and it's as wide as a dump truck. Other times, it's precise as a surgeon. But no matter how it's going, Huntress needs to keep in mind of these collision issues on loops. Because you will hit something that you really shouldn't and will need to adjust how high you toss that hatchet. No one likes missing shots, but when it's for a reason that's outside of your control is where it starts to enter the realm of frustrating. And it makes it the worst part about her. The worst part about the Huntress: hatchet hitbox issues. With a killer so basic, it's really hard to say anything is particularly frustrating that any other killer doesn't also have to deal with. So the only thing left is Bubba's Tantrum. You're often going to feel this the most with those uneven loops where you need to chainsaw sweep around them, where random crap is sticking out so the hitbox is less than straightforward. looking towards you, Eerie of Crows. Something just out of your vision or looks further away than the hitbox actually is, and boom, depending on how many tokens you have consumed, can leave you there helpless watching the survivors flee away to the next loop, or leaving you feeling eternally locked in the tantrum animation till the sun dies out. It's not only on loops, some maps have a lot of random crap lying around, indoor maps have very small, tight openings, and sometimes just hitting a survivor going for a hook save can leave you stranded. The worst thing about Leatherface is tantrum.
No. Does your mom know that you're playing with a sex offender right now?
The most frustrating thing with Freddy is loading up to a match of Dead by Daylight, getting a hit, and hearing that glove sound effect. Thinking this feels so great, only to realize you got nothing going on and you're stuck playing Freddy for the rest of the match. And no matter how much you want to keep giving him second chances, no matter how much you love hearing that glove make that sound, you are going to be bored out of your mind and probably falling asleep while playing Freddy, which is very on brand, so I'll give him that. Worst thing about Freddy? The disappointment playing him.
Now, what was the point of it? Why bother?
I don't know if it's just me, but I've been in so many situations where you just get that down on a survivor, and the exact moment before you're going to snap that hat on, a generator pops, or even two of them pop. And you're just left sitting there defeated and devastated, because you know this trap is basically as good as garbage now. Another generator is not going to finish really anytime soon, so the survivor has all the time in the world to get that head trap off and not have to make risky choices to do so. Sure, you still get them not doing other tasks for a little bit of time, because they still have to remove the trap, but they can do it at their own pace, really not offering much besides a minor distraction. You lose a good chunk of your power for it. The worst thing about the pig, threatless head traps.
The body is round.
Coming into this video, I couldn't even think to myself what really was the worst thing about the clown. He more so has a lot of small things rolled up into an asthmatic ball, but loading up into a single match to get some footage for this video, it became immediately transparent, as I got what could be the clown's worst map, or at least one of them. I was instantly reminded how much I hate goddamn foliage, those trees, those leaves, those little overhanging fucking branches. Always exactly in the path where I'm tossing my bottles, blocking me like a basketball player. Since the clown throws his bottles in an overhand motion, he is very prone to hitting things you wouldn't expect to be there, or even take into account like you would with other ranged abilities like Huntress, Deathslinger, Trickster, and even the Unknown, where their whole gameplay loop is making sure nothing in front of you is blocking the shot. But with the clown, you need to think, how high am I throwing this bottle? How far? Will it snag on anything? And a lot of maps have some high up clutter, making angling bottles a challenge if you're trying to hit some long-range intoxications. It's something you can definitely manage if you really know the power well, but it still does have to be the worst thing about the clown, cause reloading's not even really that bad anymore. Worst thing about the clown, those goddamn tree branches blocking me. I hate them so much I'm going to become a lumberjack whose sole life goal is clear-cutting as much forest as I can out of spite.
You're going deaf. Completely deaf.
The biggest issue with the spirit is one that has not been talked about in years. I'm going to be talking about something that's not actually even in the game yet, but this dark phantom of the past is about to make a massive comeback, and that is Iron Will. Iron Will is getting a change to completely remove survivor audio while injured by 100%. Seeing as the spirit's whole power is about listening to survivors' movements and groans of pain, their audio being completely removed makes actually pinning down the position of a survivor incredibly difficult, and more so, very fucking annoying. Iron Will was one of the most used perks before its controversial nerf, and is basically coming back in full force, meaning we're going to be seeing it a lot of the time. making matches for a lot of Spirit players a whole lot more challenging and really frustrating, especially since Strider can no longer save them. Worst thing about the Spirit, Iron Will.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch?
Just a flesh wound.
Survivors who don't heal and only mend when absolutely necessary, aka playing properly against the Legion's power. When you're playing against a Legion, a lot of your counterplay is just like Plague. Don't heal. Just do the generator, and when all survivors do that, you're just a regular M1 killer with no power at all. This also goes for those who don't mend until necessary, so when you do get a hit in Feral Frenzy, they won't show up on Killer Instinct, and this can actually throw you off if you're not paying attention, allowing them to sneak by and maybe get an objective you thought was clear. Worst thing about the Legion, survivors who don't heal or mend.
Oh my god, my insides are on fire!
Plague is a frustrating killer for both sides. She has a lot you need to know to use her effectively. A lot of small tech and puke manipulation. How to angle it, how much to use, when not to use it. Just like Legion, good survivors know to never heal unless absolutely necessary, so most of the match, you're just left as a basic M1 killer. Sure, all the survivors are basically one health state, and that's great, and pretty strong, but it is kinda boring since you can't do anything interesting with the puke, which has a huge skill ceiling to play around with, and make some very interesting trick shots, but seeing how you'll hardly ever have your Corrupt Purge, which can do damage to survivors, that won't be something you get to play around with as much as you would like. And while this does suck, there is a worst part about it. Those moments where you actually do get your Corrupt Purge, making the Plague a massive threat, only to be instantly removed because you got stunned. If you had no idea a survivor was waiting beside a pallet inside or outside of Chase, you get stunned by a bad hitbox, or even get surprised head on. There goes your power you're probably only gonna get 2 or 3 times in a match, unless the survivors play really bad. Worst thing about the Plague? Losing Corrupt Purge by stun.
You're behind the couch.
How do you know that?
I can see your feet.
To anyone who plays Ghostface, you know what I'm going to say. So I want you all to say it with me, because I'm sure that most of you are going to say the exact same thing. So let's say it. The worst part about Ghostface is being revealed behind a goddamn rock! Has it gotten worse over the years, or have I just not played Ghostface in so long I truly forgot how jank this reveal truly is? Where you can be seen by a survivor and manage to bury yourself miles into the ground until you see the magma at the core of the earth, yet the survivor can still somehow reveal you because reasons. It just feels like you don't actually have much control in not being revealed, as you can hide the best you can and be completely hidden, yet still be revealed for whatever the spaghetti code reason might be. The worst thing about Ghostface, the reveal mechanic.
I will not tolerate a premature charge born of your eagerness for glory.
Demo is honestly a simple killer, but probably the best designed killer in the entire game, and maybe even the best balanced. So there are a few nitpicky things with Demo that can make him frustrating, like shred hitboxes being pretty bad, as sometimes you can hit a pallet and not break it just because the angle of your shot was a little too far off. But the part that stings more than anything else is the Demogorgon premature shred. Something I still experience time to time, even with the amount of hours I've put into the Demogorgon. What is an example of a premature shred? When you're going for a very tight shred and you need to launch it at a pixel perfect moment to actually get that hit, but you don't fully charge the bar. Instead, you get it to 99% charge and let go at the last possible millisecond before being able to actually use your shred and just firing a blank and losing all of that momentum. It is entirely a skill issue, but sometimes the timing is so narrow you can't wait that half second longer and you just lose for it. Always feels bad, and it really has to be the most demoralizing thing about playing the Demogorgon. cause it is 100% on you. The worst thing about the Demogorgon, premature shred.
You smell that? It smells like a fucking weeb.
Oni has a weak early game that is exploitable if survivors choose to abuse it. And they should. It is the best thing to do against the Oni to stop him from getting his power, but it is also the worst thing about playing him. Survivors just pre-dropping pallets in the start of the match, playing as safe as possible to delay you getting that first injure as long as they can. The Oni without the blood is just a basic M1 killer. If the survivors choose and have a good setup, can force you to munch a lot of pallets, losing so much map pressure. It just feels bad not being able to get the ball rolling as Oni, and honestly is the only really bad thing about him. Everything else just feels great in my opinion, if you know how to use him. Getting to the power that first time especially, that really can suck. Worst part about the Oni, survivors preventing injuries as hard as possible.
Get out of my way! Get out of my way!
Something special Deathslinger has that no other character suffers from, even as close as he does, is Body Block City. If you get a long range shot and a fellow survivor is not far away, that down can be entirely taken away from you. Extra stinging damage if it was a difficult shot too. The actual pole can feel really bad in a lot of spots where you just can't secure that final hit on a survivor you were hoping to. No matter how impressive the shot you made was, nothing is more deflating than watching a survivor scurry in from the side of the screen, standing between you and getting a finish on an injured survivor. The worst thing about the Deathslinger, body blocks.
Welcome to the Gulag. If you survive, you earn your freedom.
While you're playing Pyramid Head, he will make you suffer the endless punishment of trying to get a survivor inflicted with torment. It really feels like a chore to get a survivor to run through your trail. You have to go out of your way in a lot of scenarios to put a trail down in a spot to force them to run through it. And during fast-paced matches especially, it's usually just more worth to go for that quick punishment of the dam, take the injurer down, and hook them normally. This is such an issue the devs even thought of trying to have Pyramid Head leave a trail whenever he launched a shockwave, which would turn this somewhat tedious action into something absolutely brain-dead easy. It does give a pretty decent reward of insta-sending to cages or even executing a two-hooked survivor, but that doesn't mean it's not annoying to actually try and get use out of, unless you already have a massive lead in the match. Worst thing about Pyramid Head, getting survivors tormented. We're talking about Blight, so it can't be anything else besides collision. No matter what state the Blight finds himself in, collision is your greatest ally and greatest enemy. The amount of times where I'm about to get in a position to hit a survivor while rushing, only to re-hit the same surface again, just because of something slightly sticking out, or something below me I just can't quite see, and now you lose that chance to get the hit. Sorry kid, better luck next time. It is entirely a skill issue. Well, maybe, I don't know. I don't play Blight enough to really know for sure if it is entirely a skill issue, but it probably is. But regardless, it feels awful. And with current Blight we have in the game as is, it's something more likely you're going to experience than you ever did before. So it's a pain you're gonna have to get used to. Worst thing about the Blight, accidental double bounces.
Fly me to the moon.
Twins and problems go together better than YouTubers and minor scandals. So picking what the worst thing is about the twins is very much a challenge. So I picked the thing that has claimed more hair from my scalp than any buzz cut could. Victor does this thing where he likes to roll in baby oil before a match, giving him the max amount of bounciness. When you jump as Victor, sometimes you slide over something no problem, or you can stop dead in your tracks. Most of the time, I'm fine with hitting a wall, but when you get launched like 20 feet away from where you were intending to hit, right into the survivor's grasp, I can't help but weep and regret ever buying the twins. Worst thing about the twins, Victor bouncing incredibly far.
Yo, come on, man, I can't have shit in this house!
I'm not gonna go deep on this. The worst part of the Trickster is how many maps just seem to be missing lockers and spots they really should be. It's so annoying having to go out of your way to reload at a locker or just be a regular M1 killer. And it used to be much worse when he was 110% movement speed. Worst thing about the Trickster, finding a locker when you need it.
Let's talk about erectile dysfunction, or ED.
Nemesis can be a very slow killer, needing to get several whips before he can actually get the ball rolling, where survivors will just have 3 health states against him, unless you go for only basic attacks, but then you're not leveling up your powerful whip. Basically, the ability is strong once it actually gets up and going, but the time to get to that point can sink the whole match. If survivors play well, and you miss a couple swings, Nemesis can just fall so far behind in momentum. It feels really bad when you can't quite get there fast enough, adding a lot of stress on the killer experience, especially when you're having a bad game. Because regardless, the snowball needs to be earned. No matter how much you mess up in the match, you can't just instantly turn it around. You still need to make up for that lost time somewhere at some point. Maybe it'll be easier at a later point, but you still have to earn it. All I will say is it makes sense why so many Nemesis players find themselves tunneling. Worst thing about Nemesis, early game whip upgrades.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it. Aw, dang it.
When I play Pinhead, it feels like I'm gambling sometimes with how my chains will work. Will I actually get use out of all my chains? Or will all, or most of them, break on the environment, making my shot worthless? It's not that it's a huge commitment or anything to hitting a survivor with a chain, it's the fact that how often you can hit some very challenging and expert shots to not only not be rewarded for it, but punished for it, where the chains break instantly, or a survivor's friend breaks all the chains instantly, making your power so inconsistent in its capability. I love playing Pinhead, because hitting chains feels absolutely fantastic. Hitting trick shots is some of the best times I've had as killer, but I don't play Pinhead a lot with how often it feels deflated or unrewarded for getting those good shots in. I don't know, it just really feels bad with how often the chains can actually hurt you rather than help you in a match. Worst thing about Pinhead, inconsistent chains.
Today I crave bird spit. You can keep the eggs though.
Artists can do some cool stuff, and while I'm not the biggest fan of how the power boils down to in a lot of situations, I do see the charm of sandwiching survivors and timing your launches to hit some unique shots. What I do really hate, and I think most will agree, is how easily a shot can be negated entirely. A survivor gets swarmed by crows and hops in a locker, instantly removing your shot. When you get that decent long shot and then plan to pressure them, only to hear that loud noise notification and see the birds fly off for winter, you're just left sitting there thinking, well, it's my fault for getting too creative, I guess. The worst thing about the artist, crows being removed by lockers.
I'm creeping around right now, just can't see me.
Sadako to me just feels very stable. I don't really have anything I personally can pin down as really awful. A lot doesn't feel great, but nothing really rubs me the wrong way. So it's less of something mid-match that is awful, and more so you just can't play Sadako as a true stealth character. She has a lullaby while demanifested. If you want to go true stealth, you have to rely entirely on terror radius hiding perks and stay manifested. Not a massive issue, but she already has such little going on with her kit. Using perks to go stealth and basically removing one of the 2 big aspects of her power just makes it not really worth it. Better to play some other kind of build and just deal with the lullaby. It's my only real issue with the character besides her just not being very interesting. The worst thing about Sadako, awkward stealth options.
Release me!
Nothing else really comes quite as close to feeling bad in this game as going for a really clever locker teleport, only for said locker to be locked and you're stuck scratching at the doors hoping the survivors didn't make it too far away to make the chase still worth it. Locks are important counterplay for survivors, but it is a simply miserable feeling when it happens as the Dredge. Worst thing about the Dredge, locks.
I am a god, and even kings bow to gods.
One of the best things for survivors to do against a Wesker is by far the worst thing for him. When you use your power, your virulent bound, and you even slightly clip a window and get launched through it. Funny, but frustrating. But you know what's even more frustrating than that? When you go for a Wesker bound on a survivor that is vaulting a window, it's just perfectly timed enough in the worst way possible. To not let Wesker vault, but also not letting him hit the survivor, and you just gotta sit there with your Ouroboros in your hand, waiting and thinking it over. That would have hit me. The worst thing about Wesker, janky window hitboxes in virulent bound. When you launch your knights on a survivor, but for whatever reason it just misses them. Now you're forced to watch as that guard wanders off doing nothing of value. This is going to change once the new knight reworks go live, but I haven't played those, so I can't quite say what the new worst thing is with the knight. But for now, this is the worst knight issue. The worst thing about the knight, missing a survivor and the patrol doing nothing.
You see, at this point, I'm pretty much the queen bitch of the universe.
Skull Merchant kinda has it all. I don't think anything really feels bad about playing Skull Merchant. You have tons of options and things to play around with, and a pretty strong power. The only really bad thing about the experience of playing Skull Merchant is when the game ends and the survivors start tearing you apart in endgame chat for playing Skull Merchant. Bonus points if you get a post-game message through the console services or a Steam comment. Worst thing about the Skull Merchant, survivor reactions.
Where are my testicles, Summer? They were removed. Where have they gone?
There is a lot that feels bad about the Singularity, and a lot that feels good too, but if most killers are max, user-friendly, and streamlined, the Singularity is more like a PC, harder to understand and a lot more to learn at the base level. At least compared to the competition. No matter how good the end result is, it doesn't change the fact when you are learning, it just feels awful to use. Not knowing what to do and when to do it, at least well enough for it to actually even matter. But the real pain comes when you actually start to do something. You start to make that progress on the Singularity, only for it to be wiped away in a moment. EMPs. They are important to keep the Singularity from becoming one of the most awful things to deal with in this game. But it always hurts every time you hear that sound effect. Sometimes getting that first slipstream is a challenge, depending on the loop or the map, so after finally getting it, being forced to do it again just makes the experience feel like a sandpaper slide. The worst thing about the Singularity, the EMPs.
Look what you've done! I'm melting! Melting!
The Xenomorph's tail is as wild and untamable as the beast who controls it. It getting snagged on things it really shouldn't is a pretty common occurrence anytime you play a match as the Xenomorph. Especially with Dead by Daylight's very inconsistent hitboxes. I think most people would probably cite that as the worst thing about the Xenomorph, but for me personally, the feeling is so much worse when I have to suddenly and quickly hit a flame turret I didn't know was there, like flicking my camera, making a shot, and missing. Sometimes it's my fault entirely, and other times it really looks like it should hit, but it just didn't. And now you're forced to sit there bathing in the fire, unable to move, forced to accept the fact that you're going to be standing up very soon. The worst thing about the Xenomorph? Missing tail attacks on turrets, with a side order of hitting things you feel you shouldn't be hitting.
Don't have a problem with killing.
The first thing I thought of for Chucky was downtime. When I mean downtime, I mean anytime you don't have a slice and dice and just feel so goddamn slow. 5% movement speed less than most other killers doesn't sound like a lot, but anytime you are forced to do that basic attack looping without your power, just running around those average loops where a 115% movement speed killer could maybe pull off a mind game enough to squeeze out a hit, but with Chucky, it just feels like you're biding your time until your power charges back. Since you're so small, sometimes you can get an unexpected hit, but when you can't, it just feels like busy work until you can actually start to play the game again. Worst thing about Chucky, when Slice and Dice is on cooldown.
What is that? It's the unknown.
Buckle up, because we have another collision issue killer. Getting tired of them yet? Because I sure am. The good side for the Unknown is even though it has some collision issues with its glob shot, it feels way less frequent than the other killers who suffer in this category. The Unknown only really suffers 2 issues to me. 2 issues that annoy me in any real way. The first being that he can't aim his lob very high, making shots in the second story buildings, windows, second floors, impossible. But that is hardly even a situation you would have to deal with in most matches, so whatever. There's only one thing that really grinds my gears, the only thing that really does. It's when you're shooting your glob and a lone twig the size of a shoestring blocks and bounces your shot in a completely different direction. Also, when you go for some wall shots to maybe hit a survivor on another side of the wall and for some reason it doesn't even bounce and just insta blows up. I'm not talking about it hit a corner and it hit twice really fast, like sometimes just straight up explodes the moment it hits a wall. And sometimes when it bounces once and then takes forever to drop back onto the ground. The bouncy pink ball's strength is also its weakness. So often it feels like the lob has a mind of its own, that even when you do take an account of angles, it still somehow finds a way to surprise you and does something completely unexpected to deny actually getting you that hit on the survivor. The worst thing about the Unknown, the collision of the ranged projectile.
No-life nerd who's never gotten pussy before in his entire life.
I can't think of anything else on Vecna that feels as frustrating as Flight of the Damned can be, and how often it can bait you into thinking you can get a hit only for it to miss completely. Not to mention how easy it is to avoid, except for exact specific moments it can be used. It feels like you're not really incentivized to be creative with how you use it, and instead wait till they're stuck in a vault animation, or use it to get a little extra distance to get a basic attack hit. It is a deceptively limited power. You have those moments where you can go for crazy shots, but it feels like 80% luck and 20% skill and no concentrated power of will. It's not as offensive as many other killers' issues on this list, but when it comes to downsides, it is one of Vecna's. The worst thing about Vecna, Flight of the Damned. And that was the worst thing about every Dead by Daylight killer. I am going to be doing a companion video about the worst things about playing against each killer. But this was just a video explaining the problems you will encounter and have to tolerate anytime you play as one of these killers in Dead by Daylight. So what did you think? Was there anything that I missed that actually is worse than what I suggest? You main a killer so much that you know the small, minute details and can really specifically piece out something even worse than I suggested in this video. If you have it, let me know. Let's hear about it, and maybe I can use it for the next video. But this video went on for a lot longer than I was expecting, so I'm going to wrap it up. If you like this video and want to see more like it, share your voice and hit this video with a like, and it will send the message to see more stuff like it. Remember, it's only a second for you and a ton of help for me. Thank you all for watching. My name is Dusteroo, and I will see you all real soon. Bye-bye.